His first memory was a grave. Small, shallow, dug in dry earth with a broken cross laid over it. He was just a boy then, staring at the hole where his mother's body lay. A preacher mumbled words he didn't understand, words that sounded hollow against the desert wind. By nightfall, the boy had no one left, and the town had no use for him. They never gave him a name, just called him Kid, like he was something half-formed, not worth the trouble of more. He grew up on scraps, stealing bread, sleeping in barns, running from boots and belts. The desert raised him harder than any family could. The heat carved his skin. Hunger sharpened his bones. Hatred filled his chest until it was all he had to call his own. By 16, he carried a gun. By 18, he knew how to use it. He never drew fast, but he never missed. Men laughed at him, called him a stray, a nameless mutt with too much anger and not enough sense. The laughing always stopped when the first shot rang out. Still, even as his reputation spread, the hollow inside him grew. He wanted more than fear. He wanted someone to look at him and see more than the dust that clung to his boots. But the West had a way of taking dreams and grinding them to ash. One night, after another nameless town, another fight that ended in blood, he found himself staring into a cracked mirror. The face that looked back wasn't a boy anymore. It was a man carved by hunger, anger, and loss. A man with no name, no home, no tether. And it was then, in the reflection of that broken glass, that he swore one thing. Someday someone would say his name with weight. Someday the world would know him. But that oath would not come without blood. And the first threat of it began the night she walked into his life. The woman who carried secrets sharper than any blade. The bell tolled slowly, its iron tongue echoing across the dust-choked town. The nameless man stood at the edge of the street, Colt at his side, watching as two riders dragged a body across the square. The body left a trail dark as tar, staining the dirt, staining the silence. They hauled the corpse up the church steps and dumped it like garbage at the preacher's door. The crowd gathered in tight whispers. Mothers pulled children close. Men shifted uneasily, hands on their belts but not their guns. Nobody dared move. The rider in front, broad-shouldered, scar carved across his cheek, spat in the dust. "This is what happens when folks forget who owns this town," he barked. His voice cracked against the bell's echo, cruel and certain. The nameless man's jaw clenched. He had seen death, plenty of it, but something about a body left on holy ground set fire in his chest. He recognized the dead, too. It was Sheriff Thomas Hale, the only law the town had, gunned down like a dog. The scarred rider turned, eyes scanning the crowd. Any man thinking he can wear the badge next, think again. Raven's men rule here, and we don't forgive. Fear gripped the townsfolk, but silence gripped harder. No one spoke. No one stepped forward. The nameless man almost did. His fingers twitched on the Colt, heart pounding in the hush. But he wasn't here for them. He had learned long ago the world wasn't saved by men like him. Still, when the riders mounted and galloped off, their laughter cutting through the dust, the nameless man walked to the steps. He looked down at Hale's broken body, at the blood soaking the preacher's door. He thought of the grave he'd stood over as a child, and the vow he'd made. The preacher, an old man with eyes dim but steady, stepped out. His voice was low, cracked with sorrow. "What's your name, son?" The nameless man looked up. The words caught like grit in his throat. He had none to give. He turned without speaking, the weight of the dead sheriff pressing heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, whispers grew. Not about Hale, about the drifter who had stared at death and didn't flinch. In towns like this, stories grew quick, and sometimes they grew into legends. That night, under a sky split with thunder, the woman appeared. She walked out of the storm with fire in her eyes, dragging secrets and trouble behind her. Trouble that would tie her fate to his, and spill more blood on more church steps before the week was done. Rain came down in hard sheets, beating the dust into mud. Thunder rolled across the desert like cannon fire. The nameless man sat under the awning of a shuttered store, smoke from his cigarette curling in the wet night. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He never waited, but fate had a way of finding him even in the loneliest corners. She came through the storm like a ghost wrapped in firelight. A long coat clung to her frame, hat pulled low, eyes burning through the downpour. Her boots splashed mud with every step, each one steady, deliberate, like the storm belonged to her. She stopped in front of him, water streaming down her face, and for the first time in years he felt caught. like he was the one being hunted. "You're him," she said, her voice low, sharp. "The one they call the kid." He ground the cigarette out, eyes narrowing. "Depends who's asking." She pulled the coat open just enough for him to see the iron at her hip. "Not a warning. A promise. My name's Maeve Calder," she said. "And if you're half as fast as they whisper, you're the only one who can help me." He should have walked away. He always walked away, but something in her tone stopped him. Not desperation. Something colder, determined, dangerous. She sat across from him on the steps, rain dripping off her brim. Her story spilled quick, each word a nail hammered into his chest. Raven's gang had taken her land, burned her home, killed her kin. She wanted revenge, not justice, and she'd marked him as the blade to strike it. The kid's silence stretched long, the storm filling the space between them. He knew her type. He'd seen vengeance eat men alive, leaving nothing but ash. But he also knew the fire in her eyes wasn't one that would fade. If he didn't ride with her, she'd ride alone and she'd die. He tilted his hat lower, sighed through his teeth. "You don't want me in your war, lady. I don't fight for others." "Never did," her gaze never wavered. "Then fight for yourself. Fight to carve a name out of this godforsaken dust. Because if you don't, they'll come for you anyway." Raven doesn't leave strays breathing. The storm eased, leaving only the smell of wet earth and smoke. The kid felt the weight of her words press hard on the hollow inside him. Maybe she was right. Maybe this was the road he'd been walking his whole life, and all that was left was to ride it through. He stood slow, hand brushing the colt at his hip. Maeve rose with him, eyes sharp, unreadable. Lightning split the sky behind her, painting her silhouette in white fire. And in that flash, he knew, whether she was truth or lie, savior or betrayer, his fate had just chained itself to hers. The firelight flickered in the abandoned barn, shadows crawling up the beams like restless spirits. The kid sat with his back to the wall, Colt in his lap, eyes locked on Maeve across the flames. She hadn't said a word in hours, just sharpened her knife slow, the steel hissing against the stone. Finally she spoke. "Raven's men are moving south. Tomorrow night they'll ride through Mesquite Pass. That's where we take them." The kid's jaw tightened. "We?" Maeve's eyes lifted, steady, unblinking. "You wanted a name. This is how you earn it. Stand with me, end him. The world won't forget." He almost laughed, but it caught in his throat. The world never remembered men like him. It buried them quickly, leaving their bones in shallow graves. He leaned forward, voice low. "And what's in it for you, Maeve? Revenge, land? Or are you just looking to drag me down with you?" Her hand stopped on the knife. Her voice softened, but it carried more weight than any shout. "He killed my sister. Took her from me in the dirt while I watched. I swore on her blood that I'd put him in the ground. With or without you?" The silence after her words was heavy, broken only by the hiss of the fire. The kid felt the echo of his own past in her story. His mother's grave, his father's scream swallowed by smoke. Pain was a chain and hers clinked against his own. But he didn't trust her, not yet. He lifted the Colt, cocked it slowly, and leveled it across the fire at her chest. The hammer clicked loud in the quiet. Maeve didn't flinch. "If I ride with you," he said, voice flat, "it's on my terms. No lies, no half-truths. You cross me, I end it right there." Her gaze burned hotter than the flames. She stood, stepped into the circle of light, and pressed her hand against the barrel. The iron sizzled against her damp palm, but she didn't move. "Then pull the trigger," she whispered, "or take my hand. Those are your only choices." The kid's finger hovered, heart hammering steady. The fire snapped, sparks jumping like gunfire. For a long, breathless moment, the world hung on the edge of a decision. Finally, he lowered the Colt. Maeve's hand slid away, her skin marked but her eyes unshaken. The bargain was sealed, not with words, but with the weight of what hadn't been done. Somewhere beyond the barn walls, a coyote howled. The kid knew then that the desert had heard their pact, and the desert always demanded blood in return. Night lay heavy on the desert, the sky lit only by a crooked moon. The kid rode low in the saddle, his hat pulled down, eyes scanning the black horizon. Beside him, Maeve moved with the same quiet rhythm, her rifle slung across her back, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Mesquite Pass stretched before them, a narrow cut through stone and brush. The wind whispered through the twisted trees, carrying the smell of dust and gun oil. Every shadow looked alive. Every sound felt like a trigger waiting to be pulled. They stopped at the ridge, looking down into the pass. Torches flickered below. Raven's men, a dozen at least, maybe more. Their laughter drifted up, sharp and careless, as if the desert belonged to them. Maeve leaned close, her voice barely a breath. "We hit them here, fast, clean. Leave no man standing." The kid's jaw tightened. Killing was nothing new to him, but this wasn't survival. This was war. He studied her face, lit pale by moonlight. She looked calm. Too calm, as if she'd lived this moment in her mind 100 times. "Revenge makes folks blind," he muttered. "Not me," she said, her eyes never leaving the riders below. "I see clearer than ever." Before he could answer, a twig snapped in the dark. The kid spun, Colt drawn, eyes searching the brush. Out of the shadows, a figure stepped, lean, ragged, with a shotgun leveled at them. It wasn't Raven's man. It was a boy, maybe 16, dirt on his face, fear in his eyes. His hands shook on the stock, but his voice came hard. "Drop your guns. Both of you." Maeve's rifle swung up, but the kid's hand shot out, pushing it down. His gaze locked on the boy's trembling grip, the too thin frame, the way his jaw clenched like he was trying to be a man too soon. The kid saw himself in that face, the boy he once was, standing at a grave with nothing left but hate. "Put it down," the kid said, his voice steady, low. "You ain't cut out for this." The boy's eyes flicked between them, desperate, angry. "They got my pa. They said if I didn't stop anyone coming through." His voice broke, swallowed by the weight of it. Maeve's jaw hardened. "He's one of Raven's pawns. Leave him or end him." The kid's gut twisted. He saw the line being drawn, the line that would mark who he was. The boy's shotgun wavered. His breath hitched. One wrong move and lead would fill the air. The kid stepped forward, slow, careful. His Colt still raised, but his voice softer now. "You pull that trigger, boy, and there ain't no going back. You'll be like me. And trust me, you don't want that." The night held its breath. The boy's arms trembled, the shotgun dipping lower. But before he could choose, a shout split the canyon. Torches flared brighter. Raven's riders had spotted them. Gunfire erupted, the pass exploding with noise and flame. The boy stumbled back, swallowed by shadows. Maeve fired first, her rifle cracking. The kid answered with his Colt, each shot ringing off the stone walls. The ambush had begun, but not the way they planned. And as the riders closed in, the kid couldn't shake the thought. The desert had just thrown another ghost in his path, and ghosts always came with a price. The night bled into fire. Gunshots cracked through the pass, sparks flashing against the stone. Horses screamed, men shouted, bullets chewed bark from the mesquite trees. The kid moved low, steady, his Colt spitting fire in measured rhythm. Maeve was faster, her rifle a song of vengeance, each shot finding its mark. But Raven's men were many, shadows darting through brush and rock. They poured lead from both sides, cutting off the pass, pushing them uphill. The kid's boots slipped on loose shale as he dragged Maeve toward higher ground. Every breath tasted of gunpowder and dust. At the ridge, they dropped behind a boulder, reloading in silence broken only by the thunder below. Maeve's eyes burned bright, almost fevered. "This is it," she hissed. "We take them here, break them, send their bones back to Raven as a warning." The kid shook his head, jaw tight. "You think a dozen's all he's got? He'll send 100 more by dawn." Her lips curled, a bitter smile. "Then let him. I'll bury them all." The kid saw it then, how deep her hunger ran. Revenge wasn't a fire for her. It was a religion, and she was ready to sacrifice everything, even herself, to feed it. Below, torches shifted. A whistle cut sharp through the chaos. More riders spilled into the pass, their numbers swelling, their shouts rising. The kid's stomach turned cold. Maeve's plan had been too simple, too thin. They weren't hunters anymore. They were the prey. A bullet struck the boulder, spraying stone chips across his face. Another ricocheted past Maeve's ear. The kid cursed, pulling her down flat. "We run," he growled. Now she fought his grip, teeth clenched. "No, we finish it." Her words cut short when a voice rose above the gunfire, commanding, cruel. A man on horseback emerged through the smoke, his frame tall, his coat long and black. His face was a shadow, but his presence carved the night sharp. Caleb Raven. Maeve's whole body went rigid. Her rifle slipped in her hands. Her whisper was more like a prayer. It's him. The kid's breath slowed. He watched Raven lift his arm, watched the rifles rise at his command, watched the canyon walls glow with torchlight. Every instinct screamed the same truth. This wasn't a fight. This was a slaughter. Maeve, he said, his voice hard, unshaking. We leave, or we die here. Her eyes stayed locked on Raven, fury trembling through her. Then, at last, she turned, her jaw set and nodded once. They bolted from cover, scrambling up the ridge, bullets chasing their heels. The desert opened wide above, moonlight spilling silver on the rocks. Behind them, Raven's men howled. The hunt not yet finished. At the crest, Maeve stumbled, blood soaking her sleeve where a bullet had grazed her. The kid caught her, pulled her upright. Her breath came hard, sharp with pain. Still, her eyes burned. This ain't over, she rasped. And as they vanished into the night, the kid knew she was right. Raven Hill hadn't been their ambush. It had been his warning. The desert stretched endless, quiet, but for the rasp of their horses. The kid rode with Maeve slumped against him, her arms slick with blood. The moon hung heavy and red, staining the sand with its glow. It felt less like light and more like an omen. They found shelter in a dry gulch, stone walls curling high above them. The kid built a fire from brittle mesquite branches, its flames crackling soft against the hush. Maeve sat opposite, her wound bound in torn cloth, her face pale but her eyes still sharp. For a long time neither spoke. The fire filled the silence, and the kid studied her through the smoke. He saw the way her jaw clenched, the way her hand never strayed far from her rifle even now. Trust was a fragile thing between them, and it hadn't yet taken root. Finally, she broke the quiet. You want the truth? Here it is. Caleb Raven isn't just the man who killed my sister. He's my blood. The words hit like a bullet. The kid's eyes narrowed, his hand stiff on the Colt resting in his lap. Your brother? Maeve nodded once, slow, her gaze unflinching. Half-brother. Same father, different mothers. He took everything from me, my land, my kin, my future. Left me with nothing but the fire you see now. That's why I can't stop. Not until he's on the ground. The kid's chest tightened. He thought of his own past, the nameless grave, the vow he'd carried since boyhood. Blood was a chain, heavy and cruel, and hers was tied to the very man who ruled this stretch of desert. You should have told me, he said, voice low. Her laugh was bitter, broken. Would you have ridden with me if I had, or would you have left me in the storm? The fire popped, throwing sparks into the night. The kid said nothing. He didn't know the answer himself. Maeve leaned forward, her eyes catching the firelight. You think I'm using you. Maybe I am, but hear me. When the time comes, when it's me or him, you'll see why I chose you. Why do I need you? The kid felt the weight of her words press against the hollow inside him. Need was a dangerous thing. He'd lived his life without it, armored by solitude. But here she was, carving cracks into that armor with nothing but her voice. Before he could speak, a sound drifted down the gulch. Hooves, slow, careful, more than one. Shadows moved above, torchlight flickering against the canyon walls. Raven's men were still hunting. The kid doused the fire with his boot, plunging them into darkness. His hand found his Colt, his heart beating steady, cold. Maeve rose beside him, rifle ready, her breath quick but her gaze fierce. The moonlight turned the rocks red, the desert painted in blood before any was spilled. And in that silence, the kid knew, before the night was through, more secrets would surface, and not all of them would belong to Maeve Calder. The canyon walls loomed high, black against a silver dawn. The kid rode at the front, Maeve close behind, their horses' hooves echoing hollow through the stone throat. The air was thick with dust and silence, broken only by the distant cry of a hawk. Every turn felt like a trap waiting to close. Maeve's wound had stiffened her arm, but her grip on the rifle never faltered. Her face was pale, her jaw locked. She hadn't spoken since the gulch, not a word. The kid didn't press her. He had questions, too many to count, but in the canyon, questions only slowed a man down. At a narrow bend, the horses balked. The kid's eyes narrowed. He dismounted, boots grinding on gravel, Colt drawn. The smell hit him first, sweat, gun oil, smoke. Then came the sound of iron caulking, echoing from the cliffs above. Figures stepped out of the shadows, rifles trained down. A dozen, maybe more, their faces hidden by scarves. The canyon swallowed the light, making their eyes look hollow, inhuman. And at their center sat Caleb Raven, tall in the saddle, his coat black as tar. Maeve froze, breath sharp in her throat. Raven's gaze found her, and a smile curved slowly across his face. "Well," he said, his voice deep, smooth, and cruel. "My little sister. Thought I smelled your fire in the wind." The kid shifted, gun steady at his side. He felt Maeve tremble, not in fear, but in rage. Her voice cracked like a whip. "This ends here, Caleb. I'll put you in the dirt myself." Raven laughed, low and mocking, the sound bouncing off stone. "You can try, but you've dragged another poor soul into your grave with you." His eyes cut to the kid, measuring him like a wolf sizing prey. "Tell me, Drifter, why bleed for her? She'll burn you the same as she burns everything." The kid's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was answer enough. Raven lifted his hand. Rifles cocked in unison, the sound sharp as snapping bones. The canyon filled with tension, air heavy, choking. Maeve stepped forward, rifle raised, her breath ragged with fury. "Take my hand," she whispered to the kid, her voice shaking but fierce. "Or kill me now. Those are your only choices." The words struck hard, slicing the air between them. The kid's heart hammered, Colt steady in his grip. Around them, Raven's men waited for the spark to set the canyon ablaze. And in that breathless moment, the kid knew. Whatever choice he made would brand his soul forever. The canyon erupted. Rifles cracked, muzzle flashes tearing the dark. Horses reared, screaming as lead cut through the air. The kid dove behind a jagged outcrop, dragging Maeve with him as stones splintered overhead. Dust rained down, thick and choking, turning the world into smoke and fire. He returned fire quickly, each shot measured, precise. One man fell, then another. But for every body that hit the dirt, 3 more shadows pushed closer, their torches blazing against the canyon walls. The roar of battle was deafening, a storm of gunfire that swallowed thought and breath alike. Maeve crouched beside him, face pale, blood soaking her bandaged arm. Her rifle trembled in her grip, but her eyes burned with the same fire that had carried her this far. She turned to him, shouting over the chaos, her words raw, desperate. "Take my hand, or kill me now." The plea cut sharper than any bullet. The kid stared at her, smoke stinging his eyes, his chest tight. In that moment he saw everything. Her hunger for vengeance, her lies, her fire, her truth. She was a storm that would either carry him to a name worth dying for, or drag him into a grave with her. A rider charged from the smoke, pistol flashing. The kid spun, fired once, dropped him cold. Another followed, and another. The canyon filled with bodies, torches falling, flames licking dry brush. Through the chaos, a voice rose clear, commanding. Caleb Raven, untouched, his silhouette carved in firelight at the canyon's mouth. "End them," he roared. His men surged forward, a flood of iron and fury. The kid grabbed Maeve's wrist, pulling her close, their faces inches apart. "You want my hand? Then don't waste it." Her grip tightened, fierce as iron, and together they rose into the storm. Side by side they fought, her rifle singing, his Colt barking, the canyon walls echoing with every shot. They moved like one body, one fury, cutting through the tide of Raven's men. But the numbers were too many. The air grew thick with smoke, the ground slick with blood. For every man they dropped, 2 more filled the gap. The kid's arms ached, his breath ragged, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Not while Maeve's hand still held his. Then through the haze he saw him. Caleb Raven, dismounted now, striding through the fire, shotgun in hand. His eyes locked on Maeve, his smile cruel. "This ends with you, little sister," he spat. Maeve's breath hitched. Her rifle clicked empty. The kid's Colt was down to its last round. The canyon went quiet for a heartbeat, the smoke parting just enough to show the 3 of them locked in a triangle of fate. The kid raised his Colt, the hammer heavy beneath his thumb. One bullet, one choice, and as the smoke swirled and the fire roared, he knew this shot would decide not just who lived, but who he truly was. The canyon lay silent, the smoke thinning to gray threads that curled toward the paling sky. The ground was slick with blood and ash, bodies scattered like broken branches after a storm. Horses fled into the desert, their cries fading into the distance. Jonah, the name he finally let himself take, stood at the center, Colt loose in his hand, its barrel smoking from the last shot. Caleb Raven lay crumpled in the dirt, his chest torn open, eyes glassy and unseeing. The tyrant of the desert was gone. Maeve knelt a few feet away, her face streaked with soot and tears, her wound seeping dark through her sleeve. She looked at Raven's body, then at Jonah, her lips parting as if to speak. But no words came. Her fire, the one that had burned so fierce, seemed hollow now, its fuel spent. Jonah holstered the Colt slow, his body heavy, every muscle trembling from the weight of what had passed. The canyon stank of gunpowder, death, and something older, the finality of choices that could never be undone. The first light of dawn crept over the cliffs, washing the world in pale gold. It touched Maeve's face, softening her edges, and for a heartbeat Jonah saw her not as vengeance, not as fury, but as a woman broken by loss, clinging to whatever pieces of herself she had left. She whispered hoarse, "You could have killed me." Jonah's eyes met hers, steady, unreadable. "I almost did." The silence stretched between them, thick as the smoke still clinging to the rocks. Finally, Jonah turned away, his boots crunching on the blood-soaked gravel. He didn't know if Maeve would follow. He didn't know if she'd rebuild herself from the ashes or burn until nothing remained. He only knew the West buried its secrets deep, and this canyon would remember theirs until the wind stripped it clean. By the time he reached the mouth of the canyon, the sun had risen, casting long shadows over the dead. Jonah mounted his horse, the saddle creaking, the leather warm beneath him. He looked back once, just once, at Maeve standing alone among the smoke. Then he rode on, the desert swallowing him whole, leaving behind only echoes of gunfire, and a name finally spoken into the dust, Jonah Red. The drifter no longer nameless, but marked forever by the dawn that buried the West.